That Jeremiah the prophet, who warned Israel of the temple's destruction in 587 BC, camping was used of God to help us see or understand the abomination of desolation, when God executed judgment on the church and commanded his people to come out of her.
You're recommending now that we don't need to go to church anymore, or?
As a matter of fact, the Bible teaches Satan rules there, and he tells us to get out of the churches.
Nonetheless, God placed limits on camping's understanding of the year 1994. Camping initially believed it marked the end of the world, but later viewed it as the beginning of the latter rain. Both assumptions were incorrect. However, in his book 1994, he accurately interpreted the 1,290 days of the abomination of desolation as signifying the end of the church age in 1994. In fact, on page 466 to 470 of the book 1994, Camping argues that this event marks the removal of the daily sacrifice and the end of the church age, during which Satan was given dominion over the churches, because the pastors began to cast down the truth. In this respect, many pastors were furious with Harold Camping's attempts to correct mistakes in the church's confessions and catechisms. Their anger deepened over his dismissal of doctrines that permit divorce, the ordination of women and homosexuals, as well as the practices of dreams, visions, and speaking in tongues. But nothing stirred up more controversy among the pastors than Harold Camping's assertion that we are incapable of taking any action to attain salvation, including the act of believing.
Well, how can I believe? I'm dead in my sins. My heart is desperately wicked. How can I believe? But I have to believe in order to become saved. God has to save me. He gives me the faith. He gives me the belief. And then, in other words, believing is never a basis for salvation. It's always the result of salvation.
This falling away in the church reached its zenith when God removed the daily candlestick of the church, symbolizing that she is no longer being used of God to evangelize the world. Nonetheless, Camping failed to realize that the removal of the daily sacrifice took place over a span of 2,300 days, starting from the day of Atonement Sabbath on September 14, 1994, and concluding on December 31, 2000, when God began his program to bring his elect out of the church. Ironically, in the year 2000, Camping himself began to teach that God's people must leave the churches. This widespread exodus caused significant concern within the church, prompting many pastors to denounce Camping and withdraw their support from family radio. Camping did not fully understand these events. As Daniel 11 predicted, some of understanding will fall, who were used to instruct many about the abomination of desolation, because they cleave to those who came with flatteries, that is, false doctrines. In Camping's case, he was surrounded by family radio staff still closely tied to the church. Additionally, he helped establish 12 fellowships led by former pastors, elders, and deacons, a decision he later regretted. Eventually, however, he encouraged his followers to focus more on worshiping at the feet of Jesus, that is, to worship at home alone. After leaving these fellowships, God began to offer a little help, that is, correction from the Bible. In Daniel chapter 11, verse 33, we read, "And they that understand among the people shall instruct many. Yet they shall fall by the sword, by flame, by captivity, and by spoil many days. Now when they shall fall, they shall be holpen with a little help. But many shall cleave to them with flatteries. And some of understanding shall fall to try them, and to purge them, and to make them white, even to the time of the end, because it is yet for a time appointed." In what way did God provide us with a little help? Well, much like Daniel the prophet, God provided correction by deepening our understanding of the Sabbath years. In Daniel chapter 9, God helped Daniel comprehend the book of Jeremiah, particularly the 70 years of Sabbaths when the captives were set free and the feast days reinstated, such as the Feast of Tabernacles, which led to the rebuilding of the temple, a symbol of God's salvation program. Similarly, God helped us understand the Great Tribulation Sabbaths, when God's elect were freed from the captivity of Satan and sin after leaving the church. Clearly, men like Carol Camping have undoubtedly been used of God to guide his elect out of the church. And once outside the church, God's elect are expected to prophesy again 2 years before the earthquake, anticipated on Judgment Day in October 2028, on or near the last day of the Feast of Tabernacles. And he said unto me, Thou must prophesy again before many peoples and nations and tongues and kings.